Hello, friends. In our episode today, you will get to hear a mysterious story that will surely touch your heart. In a small town in the Czech Republic, there was a small church where Mass was held every day. Most of the time, a fairly large group of people gathered there for prayer. At first, there was nothing at all unusual about this story, but there was something strange and unique about this church. The peculiarity lay in the fact that one of the regular visitors wasn't a human, it was a dog. The animal would sit quietly in the depths of the church during the sermon and leave after the service. The dog wasn't chased out of the church as long as it behaved well. The presence of the animal in the church wasn't the most unusual part of the story. What was most intriguing to everyone was the fact that the dog came alone. It seemed to have no owner. It remained a mystery why the dog kept coming to the service. Why would a dog want to go to church? No one knew anything about it, not even where the dog came from or where it went after the service. Nevertheless, it behaved well and didn't cause any disturbance or concern among the parishioners. It was so quiet that it was easy not to notice it at all. The priest also had no objections to the dog's presence during the daily Mass. The only thing that worried people was how sad the dog looked. It had a melancholic gaze, and its ears were always drooping. Every day, the dog would sit in the same spot, looking into the distance. This started to frighten some of the parishioners, while others began to believe that the dog could see the spirits of the departed. But the priest had a different perspective. Having owned several dogs in his life, he found it increasingly evident that this poor animal was simply incredibly unhappy. The dog appeared to be young but very thin, most likely homeless. It lived on the streets, scavenging for scraps of food to survive. Perhaps it came to the church seeking warmth, shelter, and companionship. The priest thought that maybe the dog had come to ask for help. But what kind of help exactly? After the sermon, the priest explained his thoughts to some of the parishioners and asked for their assistance in bathing and grooming the animal. People agreed. They wanted to help the poor creature in any way they could. So, they slowly approached the dog, which looked at them trustingly. It was clear that the dog wasn't afraid and was simply curious about what would happen next. When the people began bathing the dog and shampooing its matted fur, it started wagging its tail. The dog looked happy. This indicated that it must have had an owner who used to bathe it. For this dog, human interaction clearly mattered, and it seemed to crave that companionship. Even its ears perked up. After the dog was cleaned and groomed, the priest realized something. He had seen this dog before, but he couldn't pinpoint when and where. He puzzled over it while the parishioners fed the dog, and it joyfully ate the treats. Eventually, the priest decided to set aside the mystery for the time being. The most important thing was to ensure that the dog was happy and healthy before letting it go again. So, the people decided to take the dog to the veterinarian. They needed the animal to be examined to confirm that it was healthy despite being homeless. To take the dog to the clinic, the priest grabbed his old leash, which he used for his own dog. Strangely enough, the animal had no problems accepting the leash and even seemed to enjoy the moment. It obediently walked alongside the priest. It remained calm when the vet examined it and took its blood for testing. Fortunately, the results came in quickly, and the dog turned out to be mostly healthy. The vet also checked the animal for a microchip. If it had one, then they would be able to find out who the owner was and possibly locate them. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any microchip, leading them to a dead end. It seemed that they would never be able to figure out who the dog's owner was. As the man and the dog were on their way back to the church, a boy came out of a nearby store and noticed them. He ran up to the dog, hugged it tightly, and called it Richard. The priest was bewildered and asked the boy why he called the dog by that name. The boy replied that he knew the dog and its name was Richard. It belonged to an elderly woman in the neighborhood. Suddenly, it dawned on the priest where he had seen the dog before. It was in the church. The dog belonged to an elderly woman named Teresa. She passed away of old age a few months ago. To confirm his theory, the priest made a small detour and went to Teresa's old house, with Richard leading him straight to it as if the dog knew exactly where they were going. Richard sat down and gazed at the house with delight. It was now empty and abandoned. It was clear that the dog had a connection to this house. However, the priest needed to confirm his suspicions once and for all. So, he brought the dog back to the church and entered one of the back rooms where he had monitors for the surveillance cameras. The recordings were kept for 6 months. The priest hoped to find footage of Teresa's funeral. Perhaps he would see something that would confirm his theory and definitely identify Richard as Teresa's dog. The man started reviewing the footage. He searched for the right day and time. Finally, he found it. The mystery was solved. When Teresa's casket was slowly brought into the church, it was followed by a dog, Richard. The priest hadn't noticed the dog that day because there were too many people, and he was focused on the sad task he had to perform. The dog looked at the coffin with sorrow in its eyes, as if knowing that it would never see its dearest person in the world again. After that day, Richard started coming to Mass every day, sitting in the back of the church, patiently waiting for its owner. The priest felt tears welling up in his eyes. The dog returned to the same spot every day, hoping to reunite with its owner. The priest was moved by such loyalty. The priest decided to keep Richard. He would take care of the dog, provide it with a home, food, and water, and allow it to attend Mass every day. While the priest could never replace Teresa, he would do everything in his power to mend the broken heart of this faithful dog. And that's all for today, friends. Let us know in the comments if this story touched your heart. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.